Hey everybody, I am super excited about this list I've gathered for you today. It's 20 things, 20 tips if you're going to spend any extended period of time in Mexico, or even if you're just traveling for a vacation. There's a little bit of both in here. But here's what's not in here, like it's hot in the summer or learn some Spanish. Okay, duh, we know those. These are 20 things that are from my own personal experience. It's not from a list I found online that I'm just regurgitating. So I hope you enjoy these little factoids. Item number 1, why do you have to ask for the check at the restaurant? So I was born and raised in the United States, and you know, when you're out having a meal, man, you're barely chewing the last bit of food and boom, the check goes on the table. And that might seem efficient. But in Mexico, it's rude. And I found this out. I asked one of the servers and they said, actually, we feel like it's rude to come and bring you the check, which kind of implies like, you're done. We'd like the table back for the next customer, please. They want you to sit and enjoy and take your time. And then you just simply ask for the check. You can say la cuenta, por favor. If you don't know that word in Spanish, or it's escaped your memory for that moment, it's perfectly fine to give a little, you know, like, hey, from across the room, and it works just fine. That is why they don't bring you the check, just so you know. Tip number 2 when staying in Mexico, visiting Mexico, is when you're leaving a restaurant and you're walking past another table of diners, it's very polite and commonplace to say buen provecho. It's the equivalent of bon appetit or enjoy. And I found this out by literally asking somebody who walked past my table and said buen provecho. And I was like, oh, excuse me, what? Oh, okay. Oh, that's nice. And he took the time to stop and say, it's customary here to say buen provecho. It can be a mouthful in passing when you're passing other diners. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3. When you go to the grocery store, especially these smaller ones like a super aquí or an aquí, and there's a person standing at the end of the checkout stand and they're wearing a shirt, they're wearing the shirt from the store. It looks like they work at the store. They're not actually employees of the store and they rely on your tips. So if you have some change, or bring some change, plan to bring some change, leave them a little tip because that's how they earn their income. And I'm very embarrassed, but I didn't know that for a long time. I went to the store, I was with my property manager, and he gave a little tip. And I was like, oh, what? Should I have been doing that? So give a little tip at the grocery store. Tip number 4 when visiting Mérida, Mexico, is to take a Tupperware to the local market when you go to the market. This is what I like to do. In the morning, I love to walk to the Santiago market, and they've got that chopped up fresh fruit, love, and it comes in those plastic clamshells. Well, I hate those clamshells, mostly because lots of reasons, right? But I'm walking home with my bag of groceries and that clamshell's not like, doesn't close very tight, and I don't want like the watermelon to swoosh and go all over in my bag. And it fills up the garbage can. Somebody else can use the next clamshell. So they know me now when I come. I show up with my Snapware. I love my Snapware. And I have it in both of my Airbnbs. So that's what it's there for. I show up with my Snapware and I pick out the fruit that I want. She opens it, dumps it in my Snapware, and then she can use the clamshell for somebody else. And it makes it nice and easy to transport it home if you don't eat the whole thing on your way home, because, you know, that's always fun. Tip number 5 when staying in Mérida, Mexico is try the sweets. When you go to the local market, you'll see a variety of sweets out there, and some are clearly more handmade than others. But there's one that's the marzipan. I don't know how to explain it. It's about the size of, you know, like my 2 thumbs together, and it's brown and it's very pliable, like a putty almost. But it's their version of marzipan, and it's made with the seed from squash. It is the seed of the calabaza squash. And I think for sweetener, they use piloncillo. If you don't know what that is, it's the cane sugar that comes in a big cone that you grate it. It's very delicious. Oh, and very cinnamony. And it's not too sweet. And I think it's a nice idea to try the local sweets. Tip number 6 is one of my favorites. Try a cocina económica. These are economic kitchens. I admit, it can be expensive to dine out in Mérida, especially if you're staying in the historic centro where my 2 Airbnbs are. And if you're hitting up all these fancy, hip, trendy restaurants, it can add up. So an economic kitchen is a little mom and pop shop. They have maybe 2 things they're serving that day. There's one in Mérida on Calle 47 between 66 and 68. And at the end of a long day after I've been running around trying to do stuff, coming back, I love to pop in there. It's nice to feel like a regular for one. And the whole thing costs about 100 to 150 pesos. And it's a meal and maybe a homemade horchata. And I love the economic kitchens. It's very comforting. And sometimes if I'm super tired, I won't sit there and eat. I'll take it home and get on the couch and watch some Netflix like everybody else around the world does. Rain in Mérida. Oh, yeah, baby. Tip number 7 when traveling to Mérida. This is a travel tip, falls in this category. Every time I arrive in Mérida, the first night, I get in, the usual late night flight, dump my bags at my place. I head straight out the door to the Santiago market and I get a sopa de lima. It's the beautiful soup with the shredded turkey on top and a little bit of lime, a little bit of tang. And I just feel like if there was any bug on the airplane, if somebody behind me is like, I feel like the sopa de lima is just gonna knock it out of the park. So it's become my ritual. And I like having a little ritual. So try the sopa de lima. Tip number 8, take a picture of a notable store or restaurant by your accommodations for the purpose of getting an Uber or a Didi or a taxi back to your place. This will enable you to be less stressed as you wander around. Maybe you want to take a detour and you're worried about walking back, or maybe your Spanish isn't so hot and you want to tell a taxi driver how to get to your Airbnb. For example, I can say or show a taxi driver the Mérida English Library or Guayaberas Presuel, and they will know where it is. Addresses can be challenging in Mérida. There can be a house number 417A, 417B, 417C, and so on. It's easier for transportation to use a known location. Mérida streets are easy once you get the hang of it. Even numbers run north and south, numbers increasing as they go out west. Odd numbers run east and west, numbers increasing as they head south. Print a map of Centro before you go so you can leave your travel book at the house. Tip number 9 is for somebody who's staying here for a longer period of time. Make a plug and play itinerary. When your guests come to visit you, they're going to want to see the same thing as the last guest who visited you and the guest before that. So it's a nice idea as a host and as a friend to be able to say, hey, I've got this great tour lined up for you. Walk out the door at 6 a.m. and catch this group that's going, or maybe even make them a specialized group. Like I have a taxi driver I love to work with now, and he'll take people off for a day. And I could say, hey, these guys want to go to Sotuto de Peon, or they want to go to Chichen Itza. And it gives you a little bit of a break. You can have your house back for a minute. You can clean and prepare the meal for when they get home, and then everything is good again. And I'm going to sidetrack here. One time I went to Buenos Aires for 2 months. I only had 2 months. And what I found is that some of my friends said, hey, I'll come and visit you. And it wasn't like, hey, do you mind if I come for like a week of your 2-month travel? And then it put me in this really awkward space. So I had to say to all my friends, I'm not taking any visitors with me on this particular trip. This trip is to serve a purpose. I was working on something that I was writing, and I was dancing tango, and it worked beautifully. It was the perfect thing to say. It was the truth. and everyone was okay with it. So you can, if you're staying in Mexico for a long time, you can end up feeling like a bit of a tour guide, and nobody wants that for their relationships. Tip number 10, I don't know if it's so much of a tip as it is maybe a personal beef, cenotes. I love them. I think there's no finer swim in the world, at least that I've experienced. But when you go to a cenote, shower before you leave the house to get on the bus or get in the taxi or whatever, but shower. Don't put on any lotions, any creams, any sunscreen, any repellent, any deodorant. Don't put anything in your hair. Like, wash it all away. When you get to the cenotes, they have the outdoor showers, and you have to shower before you get in the cenote, and shower there too. This is like sacred land, and a lot of people are jumping in these waters, and not everyone is as cautious about what's on their skin that could transfer to these beautiful cenotes. And the reason I say do this at home is when you get there and they do have the showers, they are so cold. I mean, so cold. And it might be hot out, but man, I do not like to shower in those cold showers. Like, I'll get in there and do a quick twirl and I usually scream. But shower very well at home so that when you get to the cenotes, you can do the quick, very cold shower and have a very enjoyable time and preserve the beautiful cenotes. Ooh, tip number 11. I really like tip number 11. It's about greeting someone in the street. As you're walking along the street and you're passing somebody, or if you're like overtaking somebody, it's very common to say buenos dias in passing. And I find I love it. I love it when someone says it back. I like it when I can respond to them. And the thing about saying buenos dias in passing is you can kind of find your own personality with it. Everybody says it differently. There's not a right way to say it. So take that whole like right way and chuck it over your shoulder. Forget about it. There was one gentleman I used to pass on the street all the time, and he would say, muy buenos dias. And that was so much fun. But now I find that I say buenos dias with kind of a little dan on the end of it. You can say buenos tardes, buenas noches, depending on the time of day. And some people just use the word buenas and don't even go for the time of day part of that phrase. But find your jam with it, practice, and learn how to say, this is the one time I'm going to say, learn how to speak Spanish. Don't say Spanish, speak Spanish. Learn how to say buenos dias in your own personal way. Item number 12, if somebody is walking in front of you, you've got a couple people, 3 people, 4 people, and they're all walking side by side, especially on like paseo, and you want to overtake them and they're not scooching over, slow your roll, man. Relax, kick back. It's the culture. And I think it's a beautiful thing that people want to walk side by side or arm in arm, hand in hand. Just chill. Tip number 13, when traveling to Mérida, Mexico, or probably anywhere in Mexico, look up, look down. You got to look up because the electrical lines are running like right across, sometimes really low, like you could run into them. And I'm 5'3" and I still come across times when I could run into them. And then as soon as you're like looking up at an electric line, look down because the sidewalk might be crumbly right there or a piece of rebar sticking out just enough to where your toe would catch it and you would trip on it. So look up, look down, be alert. Don't be looking at your phone or you're gonna bite it. Tip number 14, don't break big bills in the small shops. Like, don't be rolling up for an ice cream with a 500 peso piece. And even some of the smaller grocery stores, the little tienditas, you want to pop in for a soda or a bottle of water. Don't break a big bill. Make a habit of carrying small change. Get your small change by popping into a larger grocery store. Everybody knows that there's Walmart in Mérida and, whatever. I go there on occasion or if I have to do like a load up type trip. But just be sensitive. And at the shops, at the market and whatnot, have small change. You can work it out. You can figure it out. but don't break big bills, please. Thank you. Item number 15, when you're at the ATM getting some pesos, don't accept the bank's conversion. I recently learned this. I would have saved so much money if I hadn't recently learned this. But when it says, do you accept the bank's conversion? And it's some massive markup like 6%. I was saying yes, because I thought if I said no, it would cancel the transaction. It does not. It just lets your bank do the conversion. I don't know if it's your bank or their bank, but the actual conversion. So decline, and you won't miss out on that on that ATM withdrawal. The other thing about that is different banks have a different daily minimum, and I'll have to look and see. I think it's Bancomer that allows you to take up to 9,000 pesos in one withdrawal, and that's handy because it saves you time. Nobody wants to be going to the ATM every third day, okay? Not that you'd spend 9,000 pesos in 3 days. I hope not. You should be able to do this on less. But yeah, there you go. ATM tip. Tip number 16. This is an unusual one. Don't be afraid to go into the little mom and pop stores with the crafts and all the beautiful handmade goods and not purchase something. Now, I'm not saying don't support them, but I know that I have sometimes felt like, oh, I feel bad. I can't spend right now, or I'm traveling home tomorrow, don't have room in my suitcase. I'm just not going to go in that store. But they're proud of their crafts and the wares that they are offering for sale. And it really is okay to pop in and not buy anything, ask a couple questions. Maybe a friend of yours will go in, or maybe you'll go in next time you're there. But just don't feel weirded out about popping into a little store and not buying anything. That being said, if you can afford to, support the local crafts and the mom and pop shops. Item number 17, cross the street to the shady side. The sun in Mérida is no joke. And the midday sun, literally there's no shade on either side of the street, which is why, hello, siesta makes sense. Go back to your Airbnb and dip in the pool like everybody else does. But when the shade is available, you want to cross the street to the shady side every single time, or it will catch up on you. I love this saying. So my property manager taught me this. En la sombra nos pagan lo mismo. On the shade, in the shady side, they pay us the same. So now it's a habit every time, especially when I'm with Carlos. When I'm crossing the street, I'm like, hey, en la sombra nos pagan lo mismo. So shade, find it, use it. Looking at my next tip, what's it gonna be? It will be fun for you and me. Number 18. If you're at the beach, eat a kibis. Try one. It's a kibis. And when you're laying there on the sand and the vendors come by, you'll see this very odd, if you don't know what it is, you'll see this very odd looking, you might think it's a pastry, but it's not. It's about like the size of a small football. And it's a ground wheat that's been a batter type thing that's been deep fried. And then they slice it open and they stuff it with chopped up cabbage and or ground meat. And they'll make it spicy or not spicy. You can have it not spicy. The spicy in Mérida is also a real thing. But man, try a kibis. It's hearty, it's yummy, and there's something about the kind of hunger you get after you've been swimming in the ocean. Just like, wow, I could tear into some food right now. And it's just, I love it. They're Lebanese originally. And I love the kibis. Give it a try. Tip number 19 is to join a Facebook group around whatever your objective in Mérida is going to be, or Mexico, wherever you're going in the country. There are so many different groups. I belong to probably half a dozen Facebook groups in regards to Mérida. And if you join before you go, you can learn about things like they post all the time, like, hey, there's this free art exhibit, or hey, there's this musician going to be at this cafe. Definitely. Oh, speaking of cafe, man, if you're going to Mérida, you've got to go to Zalbai. It is a jazz club. It is My favorite place in the world.
And the light on the mistletoe. But now when you turn your lamp down low, I'm beginning to see the light.
But anyway, join the meetup group or the Facebook group that has to do with your objective before you go, and that way you'll be lined up on different happenings in town. My last tip is item number 20, especially if you're going to be in Mexico for any period of time. It's a tradition. Again, Carlos, shout out to you, taught me about tomar el fresco. In the early evening into the late evening, you'll see people sitting outside their front door on the sidewalk in like one of those white plastic outdoor chairs. And it's a tradition. It's about slowing down. It's about chatting with your neighbors. It's about that the sun has finally relented a bit and you can sit outside and take in the freshness. Tomar el fresco. And that's the end of my 20 tips. I hope you enjoyed this content. Please consider subscribing. If you like and leave a comment, that really, really helps my channel. And I appreciate you watching. Un abrazo, besitos y cuídate mucho.